everyone, I'm Elaine Chow.
And I'm Trist Curlis.
And welcome to the Musician's Loop.
Loop, like a drum loop?
No, like the kind of thing that a jeweler uses to evaluate gems.
Oh, like a magnifying glass, like what we'll do on this podcast, actively listening to music like a musician.
That's right. And every week, we are choosing a track to dive into together and share our thoughts about what we find intriguing about the song.
Whether it's songwriting, chord progression, instrumentation, recording technology, arrangement, whatever, we're looking at the music we love through the lens, or the loop, of decades in the music industry.
Hey, Trist, what do we have this week?
Hey, Elaine. This week we have something that's not old like me. I know all of our songs have reached into the past somewhat, but this is the newest track that we've done here on the Musician's Loop. This is from the musician Willow.
Oh, okay.
Willow, and the song is Symptom of Life.
Oh, interesting. I think I might remember this one from a recent recommendation that you had for me. But before we get into it, can you remind us how we're listening to music on the Musician's Loop?
On the Musician's Loop, we are absolutely thrilled that you would take the time to join us talking about music. However, we also would like to invite you to listen in the best way possible. So if you do have the ability to upgrade your listening, put on the good headphones, please take a moment to do that before you listen. We like to encourage the better listening in your life when you can. Again, not always able to do it. You're out on a run. Great. Just glad to have you. But if you can improve it, do so.
Awesome. So we are going to go ahead and leave the links to the song in the show notes, and we'll be right back. Okay, holy cows. Where do we start with this one? There was so much in this one to talk about.
Yeah, it's a lot, but also super digestible at the same time.
I remember this being a part of a full album listen for me because you had recommended the entire album to me. And I remember thinking it was delightfully chaotic. And I will say that this is kind of my impression of this particular song as well, is delightfully chaotic. But as I got into it, I found that it had a lot more structure than I thought it had.
Right. Yeah, the different mixed and changing meter and stuff and some of the disparate sounds here and there gives it that impression. But then when you've heard a section the third time and you realize, oh, that seemed super chaotic, but it all happened that same chaotic way this third and fourth time as well. So then your brain picks up on that and gives more structure to it.
Yeah, so can you tell us a little bit about why you selected the song for us to listen to?
Well, like I alluded in the intro, I realized I was, again, pulling from many years back quite often, which there's so much great music in the world. I'm usually digging back, and then I realized I wanted something that was at least a little newer. It's not brand new, but I believe this song came out like 2024, so we're getting closer. So that was really one of the main things I was thinking. I need to keep my ear out for something newer, and heard this within a short amount of time of thinking of that. I said, this is great, because it also hits some of the same things that we've talked about before in terms of like meter and texture and recording and overdubbing and use of quote unquote jazz harmonies, more extended harmony. So it has a lot of the qualities in some songs that I've chosen that aren't just a few years old.
And I think what really impressed me about this was the level of maturity that I heard from a musical perspective, and just digging into a little bit of the background of Willow herself. I think that she's relatively young, and yet this is her 7th studio album. And
Yeah,
I was
she's like
like,
25,
whoa.
I think.
Exactly,
Yeah.
right?
Right.
That's incredibly prolific for such a young artist. And so I was really impressed by this particular track and also just the entire album.
Obviously, the upbringing is super important, knowing that she's the daughter of Will Smith and Jada Pinkett Smith, being in an artistic Hollywood family. And so you have a lot of opportunities. You don't need to hunker down and focus on, yeah, music's great, but what are you really going to do for your job? Not that her childhood situation doesn't come with its own set of stuff I'm just saying, relating to your comment of, wow, this is the seventh album when she's 23, 24 years old. That's pretty awesome. But seemingly having all of that support and such artistry in her family can't be dismissed.
Yeah, I do want to talk a little bit about that flip side because, on the one hand, she has a lot of freedom because of her family's history. On the other hand, I feel like it's really paired with true talent, right? And I think it's one thing
Sure.
to say, like, hey, you have all this opportunity, but you have a mediocre talent. And another thing entirely when you have all this family support and yet you have this amazing voice and some interesting things that she does with her voice and the way that she overdubs herself. I just felt like she was able to realize that talent in a way that I think a lot of people don't get a chance to do. So I think to your place, it's both talent and opportunity to be able to make music like this.
Right. And of course, it's kind of nice to have the openness and the freedom and the support, and then yet also do what you can to separate yourself and try to feel like, oh, I'm not getting this just because of who I am. Not using her last name very frequently. You always hear her just called Willow. So you want to separate from that. And obviously, the music she turns out isn't like anything that either of her parents really do directly, even though they're artistic and musical. It's not music like this. So she's definitely on her own path, has kind of some ways the best of both. Like, cool, I'm not here just because of that, but I'll take whatever advantages that there were at the same time.
It's interesting to think about also influence and about the influence of hip hop in particular, because that was something that I did hear, despite the fact that this is more of a, I don't know how you would classify
Kind
it,
of a
whether it's like
math
a
rock
nouveau.
song.
It's a bit of like, a nouveau jazz, like I don't know what kind of jazz you would call it, but
Sure.
one of the things that I was thinking about is the influence of hip hop in her lyricism and specifically in the rhythms. So
Mm-hmm.
one thing that I noticed was that there was a big part of what she sang, especially during the verses, that was monotone, right? Like she was singing one note very
Sure.
rhythmically. And the lyrics were really holding a lot of that rhythm, and the lyrics were very well written for that rhythm to kind of punctuate a lot of what was happening rhythmically. And so for that, I really pointed towards hip hop. I was like, that is a definite hip hop influence. And I felt like it was a very strong influence and a strength throughout the entire thing because the entire piece is about rhythm.
Yeah, those choruses really definitely are just kind of that one note thing. That's interesting. I hadn't thought about that.
And I think that there's another piece of there that is distinctly her own, thinking about the ways that it goes from a more dissonance into a more, I'd say, traditional chord. At the from the very beginning on the piano, but all throughout, there is this sense of, oh, I have all of these different dissonant things that kind of resolve into a really satisfying chord or a very satisfying unison. And she uses both of those things repeatedly throughout the song.
Now that you mention that, it actually is a really nice contrast. That rhythmic, keeping closer to just one note ish through all the kind of chorusy spots, I guess we call the chorus, and the melodies in those verses are a little more angular. That's kind of a cool contrast.
Can you talk a little bit about the vocals on this? I heard a lot in there, but I'd love to get your take on it.
Oh man, it's just so real and raw and doesn't seem super contrived to me. Lots of interesting doubles in places, just as interesting as all of the textures in surprising places. Yeah, really, really cool the way that some of the stacks happen in different places. Stacking, that is, just where the different harmonies happen. And again, even just doubles or triples of what the main melody is. Really well recorded. I really like the idea and the arrangement of the vocals.
Yeah, that was something that I heard as well. It almost sounded untreated. I know it wasn't completely flat. The main vocal was mixed a lot more naturally, but then you had these lush vocals, what you were calling stacking,
Mhm.
just interspersed throughout this. And when I say lush, I really mean that it felt really warm and it felt very full, almost choral in terms of the type of influence that she
Mhm.
had in those areas. And they were not mixed very forward. They were very
Mhm.
textural, what you were talking about. So, wow, like those vocals, and it sounded like her, right? It sounded like her
Yep.
overdubbing herself. There was a slightly more digitized sound to those lush vocals, though. They didn't sound fully natural, but I felt like that was a part of the texture that she was trying to go for.
Sure.
Did you get that sense?
I didn't.
Oh, okay. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
I
Tell
didn't.
me what you heard.
Well, no, I mean, I guess if I listened with those ears now, I might hear that. It didn't stick out to me that way. That may very well be the case. It just wasn't something that stuck out to me. That's all I meant.
One thing I also heard, and this is just a sidebar here, there was definitely a huge use of stereo. It was mixed left, right. There were things that were moving left and right
Yeah, the
during the entire
utilization
thing.
of panning was robust for sure. Yes.
Yeah. Well, this actually led to the thought of because it's a more modern piece, do you think that she was leveraging surround or 5.1? Because I was not listening in 5.1. And I'm kind of curious whether that is something that you thought she did or whether that was something that you heard.
Because the surround mixes that are done these days are usually afterthoughts. And especially with where she is in putting this album, I think this one really kind of blew up for her. At this point, but there's always a possibility. I'm not in the room. I'm not in her mind. I'm not in the producer's mind. You're usually thinking about that stuff way after it's wow, this one really blew up. They're giving us some money. The studio now, the label now wants a 5.1 mix. Now they want an Atmos surround mix of this. Let's take those tracks and see what we can do and spread it all out. So no, I don't think there's that kind of a thought. I think it's just using the stereo space as much as you can and just being really deliberate about how you actually utilize it. A lot of times the mix is a little more conservative just because it plays in more places on our little speakers now, on our computers and on our phones and on our TVs and some of the lesser listening places, the kinds that we don't encourage as much here on the Musician's Loop. You want it to sound good everywhere, so a lot of times there are fewer chances taken and things are kind of reined in, and I feel like that just was set aside. And yes, although vocals in the main parts are still going to be right front and center, but you're really going to play with the rest of it. I do hear what you hear, though, and think it would be an amazing Atmos or surround mix. I just don't know that that's like the intent when it's being done necessarily in the first place.
Okay, that's fair. So let's switch gears and talk a little bit about the lyrics because holy cows, is that packed as well?
Yeah, what struck you as you first got to these lyrics?
Well, they were incredibly poetic and they were covering some really deep topics. And so, as I looked through what are these major themes, I identified a ton of different themes. I'm just going to throw them out here:
Great.
transcendence, transformation, healing, fragility of life, settling for the lowly things over the more transcendent things, and missing out on the beauty of life. And
Mm.
these are just some of the major themes that I heard, not even just like individual lines that I thought, oh, that was amazing. I feel like in your 20s, it is something that you really are looking for is like, what am I doing here? Like, what is the meaning of life? What's my role in
Right.
the world?
Right.
And I felt like it was very thematic for this particular time in someone's life as a young adult. And I felt like it was very appealing from that perspective.
Yeah, I got that too. She constantly says, gotta decide if I'm going to see it. It's like what you just said, focusing on what she calls on lower things. While beauty is a symptom of life, or when suffering is craving the light. She's mentioning all these things that you can decide to focus elsewhere. You can decide to see the beauty in things.
I also see the sense of personal evolution as a starting point. There is this conversation that happens at the very beginning about a broken relationship, which I think is a very universal topic. And she's talking about, I don't know if I can go back because I've already shed the skin, because I've already
Hmm.
changed, I've already transformed as an individual, I've already evolved. And I felt like that was something that was a launching point into this deeper conversation about what evolution looks like. And then when she gets to the bridge, there is a sense of, all right, now there is this temple of a God she doesn't know, like finding the one who understands, like why we wait for pain to change us. And so there's this like very philosophical thought. And we have talked a bit about how the bridge in a pop song setting is very conducive to kind of, oh, this is the point that they're trying to make, or this is the point
Hmm.
that the songwriter is trying to pivot around. And so I just thought that was interesting where it starts out from a almost mundane transformation into this more transcendent, more holy conversation as she's trying to figure out again this meaning of life, things having to do with the divine, she's really grappling with these things. And I don't think she necessarily comes out with an answer, but the fact
Right.
that she's grappling with it is the core of the song.
Yeah. I like how she asks, why do we wait for pain to change us? Why do we choose to see the lower things? Like her coming to the realization, like you said, through this relationship. Why does it take that happening for us to see? Very cool.
There's also these two animal similes that I really wrote down.
Huh.
And so, like, the concept of a simile, here's my former English teacher, is when you say something is like something else, that's a simile. And so, in the very beginning, there's this concept of like a snake shedding its skin. So we
Mm-hmm.
have this like
Rebirth and
very
beginning again.
close,
Yeah. Yeah.
exactly, like relationship between them. And then at the end of the song, there is, it's like a turtle in the sand making way to the ocean, almost
Ugh.
meeting the end because birds are in motion. And
Ugh.
thinking about, oh, these tiny little turtles that are going into the ocean after they've hatched, and they're vulnerable during that time because the birds are going to come down and eat these baby
Right.
turtles. It was such a visual for me because I think all of us have seen those videos of like, oh my goodness, these baby turtles make it into the ocean.
Right. Yeah.
um, yeah, so I just felt like those were incredibly powerful visuals for us in the midst of all of this conversation that's happening.
Very cool. There's a lot there.
I was very surprised, I'd say, at how much I liked the song and how much deeper it was once I peeled back the layers, so to speak, and really looked at it. I think
Yeah.
this is a theme that we have been going into, which is I don't think we really understand the depth of the artistry until we really dig into it together. And
Right.
that's something I really appreciate about how we analyze music as a part of the musician's loop.
That's why we're here. I try to pick those kinds of things that there's some more to sink your teeth into and to have the listeners think about.
Okay, well, any last thoughts before we move on?
We love multi-layered stuff like this. So if you have a thought about it and maybe we miss something in a lyric or maybe you hear something else and when you listen to it, you're getting a different message from the song, you can share that with us.
So you can email us at themusiciansloop@gmail.com. That is LOUPE. Or you can message us on either Instagram or Threads at The Musicians Loop, all one word.
Yeah, those are the places you can give us those ideas, or if it reminds you of a different song that we should check out, or if there was something you didn't like about this song, let us know all of those things.
All right. Well, thank you so much for introducing this to us, Trist. I really appreciate it. This is definitely an interesting listen. And with that, we're going to move on to
Mailbag, mailbag.
That's right, the mailbag. And this week's mailbag comes from Threads as well. We've definitely been sourcing from our friends at Threads, just really kicking off conversation for us. This one comes from Chris SCC Studios from December of 2025. And it is an encouragement, maybe a rant. I don't know if it's going to be taken this way, but really geared towards singers. So he writes, singers, colon, you are a musician too. Your instrument is your voice. Start training yourselves to think and adapt like a musician. Learn to speak the language of musicians and musicianship. Any good reactions to that?
That's good advice. Yeah, this is true. Actually, when you started that, I thought it was going a different direction. All true, really, no matter how you contribute, whether you're an engineer, a producer, a singer, a writer, play an instrument, or use your voice as your instrument, all the musical knowledge that you can gain by listening to podcasts like this, etc., will all be helpful. Yeah, learn to speak the language of the people around you. That's in any craft. And no matter what you do, know the tools that your craft uses and know the language that your craft speaks and be able to be a part of that. I kind of thought it was going into the semantics that happen frequently, usually unintentionally, but can be perceived as slights. Okay, let's have the singers over here and the musicians over there. A linguistic thing that no one intends any slight. They're just trying to differentiate. They want some vocalists over there and some instrumentalists, but they don't use those words. And so sometimes when they're said that way, there's the implication that the singers are not musicians, even if the person who said it is the most equality based person ever and does not think of those kinds of slights. They're literally using a semantic thing that they don't realize that they're doing. That's why I thought that was starting. Still, I'm with Chris.
It's interesting. I had this experience fairly recently, a couple of months ago, where I was singing harmony on something, and the harmony that was in the reference track that they wanted me to memorize was out of the chord.
Mm.
And so I was like, well, wait a minute, shouldn't it be this? And I sang the thing. And it basically came down to, Elaine, you were thinking of the music like a musician, not as a singer. And I'm like, well, wait a minute. Isn't a musician a singer as well? And so I just thought it was a funny kind of thing. She was like, it's a compliment that you are thinking of things. I was like, yes, I am holding this harmony in the key that we are playing.
Right.
And so
And there's some note in that piano or guitar part that's conflicting with the note you want me to sing. Hello.
exactly.
Right.
um
Yeah.
uh, let me ask you this question as a follow-up. You and I are both fairly classically trained, me from a piano perspective, but also being a part of a choral choir, and I think you as well. Both of us read music. Where have you seen that open doors for you? And in the number of people that you've worked with, where have you seen the lack of that kind of skill closing doors for other people?
It depends on what the situation is. If you're being hired to do a particular job and there's a particular set of skills in terms of language to use, and when the person that hired me describes what they want, can I do what they mean? So sometimes it's just that. Sometimes it's just, I understand enough musically that when they say these things, I understand what they mean. And where that can hurt is if you just don't have you might be completely well equipped to do what you're asked. You just aren't familiar with it enough to understand what they mean. You might not get hired back. It's like, that person was fine and they were a good person. Just, it felt like they were behind every time I said something. The rest of the group of singers did this and it took them a minute to figure out what I meant. So it's mostly that kind of stuff. Or if it's something not as crucial or time oriented, you're with a band and you're putting a thing together for maybe one performance you need to do. Well, the decision on whether that group should stay together and make music or just keep it as the one-time thing you were designed for probably comes down to, did you work well together? Is everybody on the same page? Does everybody use the same language? 3 of the 5 people are really good sight readers and the other 2 are not. That's fine, but the things that we need don't have very much preparation and we just put the music in front of us and we go. And so those of you who don't really read, it just doesn't fly with this thing. There are other situations where not being able to necessarily read won't be a hindrance, but in some cases it might be.
To that point, I feel like you were talking about session singing, you were talking about the types of things where you need to learn how to sight read music. I know that I've worked with people in the past who haven't been able to read music, and the way that they learn music is very audio, it is very brute force in order to memorize it. And there's a sense of when I can read something, I know that I can get it a lot faster. Because I'm like, that's the third, I can read exactly what my part is.
Mm-hmm.
And in some ways, it's almost a shortcut that I can take as opposed to the brute force, I need to listen to this. And I find myself sometimes when I have to listen to a reference track and this is the part that I'm singing, I got to think, okay, am I starting on the 3? Am I starting on the 1? Like, how am I thinking about this? And I'm writing that into my music so that I have a reference point of where I'm going to be able to pick up my note. So it's interesting to think about how different people learn music, even, and how that impacts what opportunities they have in the future. And I think the times that I've sung in, I'd say, more casual situations, I wouldn't call my current church gig experience casual at all. But for some of the other areas where it's been more, hey, we have all volunteer people, they're maybe not the most classically trained people, they're taught themselves how to play their instrument. Sometimes they don't really know how to speak to other instruments. Our current music director plays all the instruments that he leads, and so he is able to give our drummer very clear indications of this is exactly the sound that I want at this point in time because of X, Y, or Z. And he will give these directions on the fly. And the same thing to the bass. He will talk about this is what I'm hearing in the bass. I want you to slap here. I want you to go down to this note and come up over here. To me, he knows that I prefer to play based off of numbers because as an acoustic guitarist, I'm constantly like transposing in my head. And so it's easier
Sure.
just to be like, okay, I'm playing A form and like capo 4 or something. Oh, you want me to move up capo? Cool, I will do that. And so he knows that he's calling things out to the bass in actual notes. He's calling things out to me in numbers. He's calling things out to the drummer by exactly what kind of fill he wants.
Mm-hmm.
And he is able to speak all of our languages to lead us in that particular way. And he's a keyboard player. Of course, he plays everything, right? But he's playing keys at the same time. And so, as I'm thinking about what does it mean to speak the language of music in the way that Chris is talking about, and what kind of additional opportunities that it gives you, I think is an interesting thing for us to think about. Because you and I, like, we're just, I don't want to say hyper educated, but we definitely come with a foundation of music education that I think a lot of other musicians don't necessarily have.
Well, and what you just described is a perfect example of like those things are crucial to his job.
Right.
But then what happens is sometimes when someone experiences that, they start thinking lesser of their ability to participate in music because they can't tell all of the musicians the stuff that your leader can tell everybody. That doesn't make what they do any less viable. If the person that's doing the lead vocals in that exact same band is absolutely amazing, is like really moving the congregation, like the songs are like, wow. Some people come to church just to hear that person sing,
Right.
and they don't understand a single thing that that leader is talking about. That's also perfectly okay,
Yeah,
because their job isn't there to know all of that stuff. Their
exactly.
job is to sing and communicate and share the music and share their gift and talent. Sure, it's helpful if they understand those things when it ends up being related to them, but I think a lot of times it's very easy for people to put that on themselves. Oh, wow, at that thing where I just showed up and I sang and people really liked what we did, but all that conversation that happened in the band behind me, I didn't really understand what they were talking about. So I must not be really good at music because I don't know all of those things. Yes, you won't be hired to do those things because you can't speak to them that way, but that's fine. That's not the thing that you're trying to do. So that's where when people ask me about that, how important is it to read music? Well, it's important if you want jobs that require you to read music. I know that sounds remedial every time I say it, but it's like when people ask me that, and the people over the years have asked me that all the time. It's like, well, it's only important when it's important. It's a tool that can help you regardless, but its import is up to you and what you want to do and where you fit in.
Yeah, I want to add one more thing as an encouragement to anyone who is looking to level up is that these are skills. It is not something that is inherent in any of us to know how to read music or to learn this language. It is something that can be learned, it's something that can be taught, and it's something that you can learn as well. So I think that that's something that
Absolutely.
we want to encourage people. If you want to level up, please do look into the resources, look into how you might be able to improve your listening, improve how you sight read. It is always a skills improvement game in everything that we do, whether it is technically, whether it is how you think of your voice and how you train your voice over time. We've been talking about musicians treating their instruments and their learning and their practice like athletes do. And I'd say that singers also have that opportunity to improve their instrument, improve their voice, improve their vocal health. There's a whole lot of things that you can do to improve not only your technical skills, but also training how your voice works. These are all
Very
things that
true.
you can do.
Very true. Great point, Elaine. Great point. We
Well, any
like it.
last thoughts before we close up?
That is all. I think that's it.
Awesome. Well, we want to encourage you all to please, please, please share an episode with one of your friends. If you're listening to us, you obviously love music, and we're hoping that you have friends who also love music. And so, one of the things that you can do to help us expand our reach is to share a podcast episode with a friend because we would love to reach more people.
Yeah. If you have a friend who might like one of the songs we covered, or maybe it's a song that you already know that you like and you can share what we talked about. Maybe we hit on a subject or hit something in the lyrics that you hadn't thought of a favorite song that you and a friend share. And also, don't hesitate to subscribe, rate, review, let us know your thoughts, suggestions. We really do appreciate it. It helps us out a lot.
Awesome. Well, thank you very much, and we will see you all next week.
Bye. Recording stopped.
I know.
Edit that out. I'll use my words. Or if you don't like us, you can let us know that too. We don't really care. Listen to the cool songs. That's the most important part.